The INTP in the workplace. The INTP in the MBTI community is known as a logician, but I'm starting to see that that's really not the right label for the INTP. I think a better example would be what David Kiersey would call them, which is the architect. Now, sometimes that also gets confused with the INTJ as the architect, but when you look at the INTP as a logician, it really doesn't convey the creativity the INTP can have. Because when you think of an architect, there's a level of design and beauty and creativity there, but it still comes from a logical basis, which is science and physics and will this thing stand on its feet? So I think I'd rather call them the architect rather than call them logician. Also, it's not really appealing to be, I'm the logician type. It doesn't really motivate people to embrace their type. The INTP is very rare, and they're probably not likely to be found too often in corporate America. Similar to the ISTP, where they might do something by themselves, they could be somebody that is like that mad scientist type, where they are working on a project or working on a discovery or designing something, have a bunch of different projects they're working on. But if they were to be found, they'd probably be more in the R&D area of your company. They share a lot of similarities with two different types, the INTJ and the ENTP. The INTJ is more of an abstract mastermind, but the INTP is a logical mastermind. The most famous INTP is Albert Einstein. And though he dealt with numbers, he dealt with systems, he dealt with formulas, he's still able to create theoretical things. But if you looked at an INTJ example like Elon Musk or Tesla, a little bit abstract, even though they are engineers and create physical things, the difference is very slight, but the focus for each of them is one's logic and one is abstraction or more conceptual. Now, with the ENTP, I think there's more similarities there. So the ENTPs are great debaters. They're great logical thinkers, but they, unlike the INTP, seek out the confrontation to learn. The INTPs are very introverted in the sense that they do not want to really engage with others, especially ones they don't view are very intellectual or don't have the drive or don't have the big brain thinking that the INTP has. So in the work environment, it's going to be a little bit like the ISTP in the sense that they're not really going to have a lot of conversations with people. They're not going to seek out conversations. They're not going to bounce ideas off of colleagues because they're stewing it in their own mind to figure it out. They're intellectual enough. So I think that with an INTP that has some success, I think there might be a certain level of coldness and intellectualism that can turn people off. You want them working for you though, because of their ability to brainstorm, just like the INTJ. They're great brainstormers. While the INTJ might spin off the planet with their abstraction, the INTP, because their first function is introverted thinking, can systematically make logical conclusions or assumptions, but they're just an idea factory. It's another one of these types that can just crank ideas out. So you'll want that when you're thinking about projects, when you're thinking about product, when you're thinking about what no one else is doing, and can we do that? Is that going to work? Yes. Is that going to work? No, that won't work because of this. Because their first function is introverted thinking, they're able to systematically figure out frameworks, figure out how does our product, how does our mission, how does our sales pitch work with the framework that exists in reality, not conceptually. When you think about genius types like the INTP, famous story comes up mentioning again Albert Einstein, where he famously would forget where he lived as he'd walk home. And you go, well, how can someone with that kind of IQ have those things happen to them? But just goes to prove that every type is intellectual in their own way. But in the sense that, Albert Einstein, like he's one of the smartest men ever. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes perfect sense to me because if you introvert your thinking, you spend a lot of your time in your own head, it's likely that a detail like that would be like, yeah, I know. And then walking home, be like, what street am I on? I'm disoriented. I was thinking about all these other things when I walked out, and now I have no idea where I am. One part of the INTP that's similar to the ENTP is you don't really want to get in an argument with them because they can recall all the facts, all the details, what you've said, where you've made a mistake, and really destroy you with it if needed. If you were talking to them and you said an adverb and they're like, do you even know what that word means? And they'll just like break down the Latin of it and say, actually, that word doesn't mean that. So you don't have any idea what you're talking about. So basically, case dismissed, you're not up to par with my skills. So that's kind of the extreme example of the INTP, but it's that level of intellectualism that will come into play in an argument. So my advice is approaching them with a challenge or something they've done wrong or something that you think that they need to improve on. It's one of those things where be concrete, give them details and examples, and much like the INTJ, they will go, okay, I understand, that's right, you're correct, I respect you, and I'll take that advice. An INTP is one of the types that just needs to sit with their own thoughts, let it pour out onto the paper, onto the keyboard, and then see which of the ideas are useful and that your corporation could use or your company could use. That's how I would utilize the INTP. Thanks for watching this video on the INTP.